How's it going, everyone? Fantasy Fanatics MMA podcast. I am James Lynch. He is JHK. If you haven't watched the show before, basically we preview an upcoming notable fight. And in today's edition, we're going to be talking about the rematch between Nick Diaz and Robbie Lawler, which is going to be taking place at UFC 266. We're so excited to talk about this. Before we get into it, just make sure you download the Fantasy Fanatics MMA app. You can put your picks in there. You can go toe-to-toe with us when it comes to picking the fights. It's the best app out there. Honestly, I've used a lot of different apps. It is the best. I already put my picks in for this weekend's card. Also, make sure to stay to the very end where John and I will be doing an underdog picks for this card coming up as well. And also, after we do the breakdown, we will be answering your questions. So if you have any questions, post them in the YouTube chat right now. We will get to them after. First half, previewing this fight. Second half, Q&A. It's all good. John, how are you this morning, or this evening in your case? How's everything?
I'm feeling very nostalgic, right? This fight is nostalgic to me. I don't, there's many reasons why, but yeah, this is just two guys that are the grittiest of veterans, and they're going to face off again. 17 years in the making, which is crazy.
Yeah, we got to first mention the first fight because when people ask me my favorite fights of all time, this fight from UFC 247, It's On, which that's back when they used to do remember the titles with the pay-per-views? Remember it was like Vengeance or whatever, right? This one was called It's On. Maybe one of my favorite fights of all time for a couple of reasons. And we'll get into how this fight came together in a second, but I want to go back even further because, like you said, nostalgic, very nostalgic. This was the card that actually had Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz on it, the first fight. I think it was the first fight or the second one. I can't remember. Either way, Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz was the main event. This fight, believe it or not, was actually on I believe it was on the prelims. If I'm looking here correctly. Yes, it was. Or no, it was on the main card. Never mind. First fight on the main card. My bad. Okay, so I'll tell you a couple interesting things about the first fight. It's on Fight Pass. I think it's on YouTube as well. You can go check it out. So I'm going to set up the scene here for what happened back then. And this fight was back in, when was it? April 2nd, 2004. So that's how long ago this fight was. Just crazy to just think how long ago it was. Okay, so I'm going to set some things up a little bit. So back in the day, Robbie Lawler, people know Robbie Lawler is this guy who came over from Strikeforce and went on to win a UFC title, and now he's lost a few. But before that, when Robbie had his first stint in the UFC, he was the next big thing. He was the guy, if you remember back in the day, John, Pat Miletich and his gym was considered like the premier gym. This is before American Top Team, before Jackson Wink, before TriStar. Pat Miletich, the Miletich Fighting Systems was the gym. They would name drop them all the time on the broadcast. You watch some of those older pay-per-views, they would always name drop Pat Miletich. He was considered like the coach at the time. So Lawler was a part of that team. And on that team at the same time, they had Tim Sylvia, they had Matt Hughes, they had even Rich Franklin, I know, was doing a bit of training over there as well. They had, a variety of different people stepping in and, being a part of this sort of super camp. So Robbie was considered like the next big thing, the next big up and comer. So Nick Diaz was known as this jiu-jitsu guy and only had a couple fights and had come into the UFC, and people didn't really know much about him other than, this is a jiu-jitsu guy, right? So if you watch the fight, and I please go watch it after you're done watching this for sure. The commentary is so biased towards Robbie. There's a point where I know Rogan in the broadcast goes, Nick Diaz is choosing to stand and trade with Robbie Lawler. He's making a huge mistake here. Like, kind of, I don't know if that's word for word what he said, but he was like implying, what is Nick doing standing up with Robbie Lawler? And spoiler alert, Nick knocks out Robbie in this fight. And it was a huge win at the time because, again, Lawler was considered this like up and comer, guy that was sort of seen as the future. And this was sort of the beginning of the end for Robbie's first UFC stint, because after he got knocked out by Nick Diaz, he ended up, losing a few more. I think he went and fought Evan Tanner and then ended up getting cut. And then that's when he went, and fought regionally and then went over to Strikeforce and went up to middleweight and then came back to the UFC after. So that's sort of the scene of what happened. Now, what happened to Nick? Obviously, Nick went on a bit of a run there as well, got very popular, but then ended up losing some fights himself. I remember him losing to Diego Sanchez, and then that was sort of the beginning of the end for Nick and his last stint. It's actually interesting. They both had a similar stint where they both ended up in the UFC early in their careers. There was a lot of promise there. Both ended up stumbling a bit, leaving the UFC, going over to Strikeforce, both of them, then coming back. So I just wanted to set that up initially. And the other little tidbit about that as well is that that's the only time Robbie had been knocked out for a long time in his career. It was, I think, much longer. I think it was actually the Woodley fight was the next fight that Lawler had been knocked out. And you think of how long after that was. So just really want to prime you guys up here for how good that first fight was at UFC 247 in the sense that, again, this was a fight that people were expecting Lawler to win. Diaz ends up winning. And this was like vintage Diaz where like his stand-up was really coming together. And that's sort of what, when people think of Nick Diaz now, they don't really think of him as much as a ground guy, as more of a stand-up guy. So this was really Nick's, coming out party for his stand-up. So just your thoughts. I'm sure you've seen the first fight, just your thoughts on the first fight, and then we'll dig into how we got here.
All right, so the first fight happened in 2004, right? And that's when I got back into watching MMA, but I wasn't even watching the UFC at that time. I was watching Pride because I just had moved over to Korea. So
Mm.
Japan, Korea, same time zone, it's on TV. So I was watching that. So I didn't get to see this Nick Diaz, Robbie Lawler fight until probably the next year or so. You know what I mean? I didn't watch it live or anything like that, but I knew who Nick Diaz was. I knew who Robbie Lawler was. And like you said, the Milicious fighting system, that team had the who's who, right? At that time, multiple champions. And, there was so much hype around Robbie Lawler. And it almost seemed like he didn't live up to the hype for a long time, right? Until he returned to the UFC. And then he went on that run and he won the title, which was very impressive. You know what I mean? And it's crazy how long it took him to get to his prime. And it just shows you cannot give up on some of these fighters, man. I think fans, they give up on the guys too fast, man. Girls too, you know what I mean? They give up on them too quick, and then you don't even give them a chance. If you're a fan, stay a fan. I'm a fan of Robbie Lawler. Nick Diaz, not so much, but Robbie Lawler, I love the guy.
Yeah. And then another quick thing, actually, as well, since you mentioned Pride, of course, Diaz got that big win over Gomi, right, years later, which ended up turning into a no contest because of marijuana suspension, which was insane. But that's another fight. If you in the Nick Diaz library, you need to watch is that Gomi fight because again, counted out. People thought Gomi was going to run over him. That does not happen. Diaz ends up getting the submission. Screw the marijuana suspension. He won that fight. I don't care what people say as far as the result of that fight, as far as what happened there. So again, and I'll also just point out one more thing. I was a huge Nick Diaz fan back then. Like I didn't actually watch this live. I was a bit even later than you, John. I actually got into the UFC shortly after that when the Ultimate Fighter came in, and then ended up watching. It was actually the Diego Sanchez fight where it's like, who is this Nick Diaz guy? Because he cut this great promo leading into the Diego Sanchez fight where he's like, who's Diego Sanchez? He should have to fight Tiki Gozan. He should have to fight Chris Lytle. I beat all these guys. And it was just like, if you can find that promo, really good stuff. But I was a Diaz fan back then. Nowadays, not so much. I hated the Anderson Silva fight. I talked about this many times. I don't like him, just clowning these opponents now when he's not winning the fights. You can talk all the trash you want. You better be winning the fight. That's my issue. It's no different than when Kevin Holland fought, what's his name? And he got Brunson when he got brutalized in that fight. So anyways, just setting that up a little bit. I was a huge Nick Diaz fan back then. Now, not so much, but that's a topic for another day. Okay, so anyways, how did we get here? Well, here's how we got here. Robbie Lawler's been on quite the losing streak lately. And to his credit, he is fighting really good fighters in the division. The losing streak started mainly when he lost the title with Tyron Woodley, bounced back and got that win over Cerrone. Very close fight, could have gone either way. And then after that, he lost 4 straight fights. The Ben Askren fight's a bit of a weird one. If you remember, there was that controversy with Herb Dean stepping in, whether or not he was out or not. Askren gets credit with the Bulldog choke. He nearly knocked out Askren in that fight. Imagine, you think of that fight, what happened in that fight, how things could have gone very differently if Lawler had knocked him out. We would have never got Masvidal. We never got Masvidal Diaz. So many, it's just crazy how little moments like that happen. Lost to Colby as well, and then lost to Neil Magny. Here's the thing with Lawler, though, and I think people sort of forget, he's losing to good guys. Neil Magny just came off a nice win over Jeff Neal. Neil Magny, I would say, and all due respect to Neil when I say this, he's probably the gatekeeper in the division. So if you're losing to Neil Magny, maybe you're a step below that, but that still means that, he's in that upper echelon of fighters in the division. So Lawler's only losing to the best. Nick Diaz, actually, I should, before you get into Diaz, the other thing with Lawler is he's at a really good camp. Sanford MMA, we know everyone's over there now, some of the top fighters in the UFC, and a lot of good bodies over there. The time of recording this, we got Ian Heinisch fighting this weekend. We got Brendan Allen, Phil Hawes on that team. Just a lot of really good bodies in there. So Lawler, part of a really excellent team over there. Lawler is 39, though. That is one thing to sort of keep in mind here. He's 5'11" with a 74-inch reach. And comparing that to Diaz isn't that much younger. He's 37. He's 6 feet tall with a 76-inch reach. So it's going to be Diaz with a slight height and reach advantage in this fight. Lawler a little bit older in this one. But again, love this matchup because of the fact that, you got Lawler who, lost to Diaz back in the day. He's looking to avenge that loss. And he's fighting a guy who hasn't fought in forever in Nick Diaz. And with Diaz, the last fight was Anderson Silva, January of 2015. So that's a really long layoff heading into this fight. But this makes sense. Do you remember when we heard rumors of Masvidal fighting Nick Diaz? And I went, why? Like, I get that you want the payday, but at the same time, like, Masvidal's been very active. Masvidal won the fight over Nick, his brother. Like, there's no reason to do that fight in the sense that Masvidal ended up getting the title shot. It didn't make a difference. But remember, there was talk of that before he fought Usman. So I'm just glad to see, I think this is a very fair fight in the sense that Lawler needs a win badly. He's lost 4 in a row. This might be it for him if he loses another one. With Nick, don't throw him into the Shark Tank. This is the exact type of fight he should have. I don't want to see Nick against a Sean Brady where, he's fighting a prospect. I want to see Nick against a notable name. Lawler's a notable name. He's on a losing streak. So this is where it gets interesting, because does Lawler have enough in the gas tank to get it done over a guy, Nick Diaz? And conversely, does Nick Diaz, being off for almost 6 years or more than 6 years, does he have enough to go out there and take out Lawler? That's what we're going to find out in this fight. But just your thought first on Robbie Lawler and where he's at this stage in his career.
What you mean, Nick Diaz or Robbie Lawler?
Robbie Lawler. We'll start with him first.
Okay. Robbie Lawler, man. It's hard to say because, when you go back and watch his last 5 fights, I mean, the Cerrone fight, he looked phenomenal, right? He looked great against Cerrone, but Cerrone was a lightweight up at welterweight. And then he goes in there in the next fight and gets blanked, like completely blanked in a 5-round fight against RDA. RDA pretty much dominated Robbie Lawler in that fight. Robbie Lawler, in his last couple of fights, what I've noticed is that he kind of gets stagnant for long periods of time. He just sits there and gets like lit up by his opponents, man. And I think that leads to, a lot of the decisions going, against him. And he still can crack and he still can, put combinations together really well. And the Askren fight, we got to take that out of the equation. Just look at the Covington fight, look at the Neil Magny fight. He was blanked by all those guys. Neil Magny, man, he beat him up pretty badly. Like at the end of the fight, Robbie Lawler's face was pretty jacked up, just blood everywhere. And if you look at the numbers, Colby Covington, man, 179 significant strikes he landed on Robbie Lawler. Man, Robbie Lawler's taking a lot of damage. RDA, 172 significant strikes. That's big numbers, man. And you're going 5 rounds and taking that much damage. It's hard to say like where he's at because he's been out for so long, man. The last fight was August of 2020. Maybe that's something that he really needed. He needed the break. He needed to regroup. Because I know at Sanford, in Gilbert Burns' last camp, like Robbie Lawler played a big role there. Like he helped Gilbert Burns prepare for Wonder Boy, like not just as a sparring partner, but like strategically, I believe. So Robbie Lawler, I think his head is still there, and physically, I don't think he's like past his prime just yet. But I think we'll find out in this fight.
Well, I'll disagree with you there. I think Lawler is past his prime, and in the sense that how do you get outstruck by Colby Covington? If you think about it, right? Colby's not really known as a stand-up guy, right? Like he ended up using it in the Usman fight. He's used it in a few other fights, but Colby is a wrestler. So the fact that Robbie friggin' Lawler, the same Robbie Lawler who's knocked out how many people in his career and has, been very impressive, gets outstruck by Colby Covington. I think that's a little odd, and I'm not taking anything away from Colby, but Robbie should stand-up wise win that fight. He didn't. He got, like you said, you saw the stats there. It was crazy in terms of what Covington was able to do.
10 takedowns too.
That's true. Yeah,
10 takedowns in that fight.
Yeah, for sure. I just think though, I remember when that fight was announced, people were like, "Oh, Lawler's going to knock him out." Well, that didn't happen. I mean, again, you're fighting a true athlete in Colby, where Lawler, not really at that stage anymore. But again, I do agree with you in the sense that I think Lawler, he is taking a lot of damage. To his credit, he's not getting finished. And I think that's why we're not at that conversation yet of, it's probably time to retire. I mean, some people have sort of thrown that out there, but he's not getting like Chuck Liddell where he's actually getting knocked out every fight. So we're not at that stage yet. Maybe this is the fight, although Diaz not really known as a power puncher. He's more of a volume guy. But that's where we're at with Lawler. So that's what I'm intrigued about. And we've heard stories about him over the last couple of years as well, not sparring as much, right? Like him just, he's like, I know how to spar. I just, for now, it's about, just keeping the conditioning up and sort of fine tuning those skills, but that could help him as well. And also you mentioned it there that he hasn't fought since August. You look before that, he fought Covington in 2019, fought in March. I guess he had 2 fights in 2019, didn't fight at all in 2018. He's kind of been spacing out the fights a little bit, which I actually think for him is a little bit better, not to, endure that much damage throughout his career. So we'll see what type of Lawler shows up there. Let's talk about Diaz. Kind of a weird case as well. He's the same fighter, John. I think, there's people that want to believe that there's people out there, and it goes with his brother as well, that feel as though Nick Diaz has the ability to beat anyone. And that's just not the case. I think him and his brother, they're very stubborn and they've never worked on their wrestling. They've never worked on their takedown defense. If Robbie Lawler was smart in this fight, I mean, he's not going to because he's Robbie Lawler. But if Robbie was smart, utilize some of those wrestlers you got at Sanford and take advantage of that, because even though Nick Diaz has he does have a superior ground game. And in fact, that's been a kryptonite of Robbie in his career. You can still take him down. You know what I mean? Like, and that's always been, and there's a reason if you look at, and I always bring this up because people always like, forget about this. How many wrestlers did Nick Diaz fight in Strikeforce? Zero. He fought Paul Daly. He fought Cyborg Santos. He fought KJ Nunes. Even in Dream, he fought Sakurai, Zaromskis, fought Scott Smith in Strikeforce and Frank Shamrock. None of those guys are wrestlers, and there's a reason for that, because when he got in the UFC and he fought guys like Condit, Condit's not much of a wrestler, but again, that was always something in his back pocket. But you're fighting GSP. I mean, I don't think anyone who would really follow the sport closely felt like Diaz was going to win that fight. I know there's some issues with the weigh-in and all that stuff, but still, there was no way Diaz was going to win that fight, especially with another wrestler there. But the reason I've sort of turned on Diaz at this point, I mean, I'm going to watch this fight. I'm not going to not, like I said, I enjoy the matchup, but there's part of me too that is annoyed at Diaz for not working on that area of his game, because that is something that Robbie can use in his back pocket. If he wants to go take him down, he has the ability to do that in this fight. Like I said, the last fight that Diaz had, it was a no contest. It was a no contest on both ends. I think Diaz got suspended for marijuana. Silva got suspended for PEDs or whatever it was. I don't know. But either way, I didn't like that fight at all. People look at like, oh man, it was so awesome when Diaz laid down on the canvas and just sat. No, I hated that. You're disrespecting a legend in Anderson Silva. Oh, not only that, but Diaz is going like this to Anderson Silva. It's like, dude, like you're talking about a legend here. This isn't some, up and coming kid or some cocky guy. You're talking about a legend in Anderson Silva and you're disrespecting him. Like that annoyed the hell out of me. I didn't like that. There's a lot of Diaz fans who were like, that was so cool. I'm not one of them. I've sort of turned on Diaz at this point because I don't like those antics. I want to see this guy win a fight. His last win is BJ Penn, which not a great win. That was, Penn was on a huge losing streak there. Knocked out Paul Daly, one of the best rounds in MMA history. Knocked out Santos, knocked out KJ Nunes. It's really tough to gauge where Diaz is at this point. He's in great shape. We know that. In fact, one of the most annoying parts about Diaz fandom is people posting pictures. Oh, Diaz is in great shape. Well, we know this. The guy does triathlons. Of course, he's going to be in good shape. So he's got that to his credit in terms of what he's been able to do as far as the conditioning. And with this being, and one thing we didn't mention, this is a 5-round fight. So that definitely, I would think, favors Nick Diaz, because I think as far as athletics go, Diaz has that. But where are the skills at? Where is the path to victory here for him? I actually think the path to victory for Diaz here would be on the ground, because Lawler has been submitted a number of times. We've seen him lose big fights like this where he's been submitted. It hasn't happened recently, but you look at Strikeforce. There's a few fights there where I remember him having some trouble. Like for example, when he got submitted by Jacare. People forget that he got submitted in that fight. Jake Shields got submitted in the first round of that fight in Strikeforce as well. So, and that's, Shields is a good friend of Nick Diaz as well. So that those are just things I point out. I think that's a path to victory, because I just don't see, unless Lawler's striking is so bad to this point where Diaz is able to like out volume him and maybe win that way, but he's not knocking him out. Maybe if he does knock him out, it'll be later, but Diaz is not a power puncher. Like this idea that Diaz is like a Rumble Johnson where he's just going to go out there and get like a first round finish. He's not like Woodley. Like Woodley did that to Lawler. I don't think Diaz is going to do that to Lawler. I think if Diaz wins, it'll be a late finish or a submission, maybe a decision just because of the conditioning. But I just think that it's difficult to sort of gauge what type of Nick Diaz we're going to have here. And also, like I said, I don't know how much he's evolved as well. So just your thoughts on Diaz and what we've seen lately. Again, we're going back 6 years here, so it's really tough to gauge what type of Nick Diaz we're going to get.
Yeah, it is definitely tough to gauge it, but he's in shape.
Yeah.
He's been doing triathlons and all that good stuff. But if you look at his record, his UFC run before he basically retired, it's 1-2 and a no contest.
Yeah.
Dare I say that Nick Diaz is not a high-level UFC caliber fighter? You could argue that, right? Because if you look at his record, he beat BJ Penn, which when that wasn't, motivated BJ Penn, right? That was just BJ Penn, like kind of like in a tailspin. And then he goes in there against Condit and gets blanked by Condit, basically, right? Because he went in there, Condit went in there and played Diaz's game, the striking.
He did. Great game plan by Condit. People hated that fight. I remember watching that, people being like, how did Condit win that? Well, it's because he was strategic. And that's, again, a weakness of Diaz, where it's like, I'm just going to fight. But at some point, the judges are going to look at that and say, that's not going to win you this fight. So sorry, I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, and also GSP, you know what GSP does. He goes in there and game plan is phenomenal, and he gets in there 9 takedowns on Diaz, outstrikes him more than double, right? And that one little sub attempt by Nick Diaz, everybody's like, oh, he was so close to submitting GSP, but GSP's he's so good on the ground too. Like the Anderson Silva fight, at the time when I was watching it, it was funny. It was like comedy. It was like a tragic comedy, right? It was like you're watching a guy that was just, even Anderson Silva, I think that was his first fight back from his broken leg. I believe so, right?
I think you're right about that, actually.
Yeah, and everybody's thinking like, Anderson Silva, is he going to be able to come back and be be himself. And you saw Anderson Silva be very tentative in that fight, but he was still sticking and moving, and he outstruck Nick Diaz in the fight. And Nick Diaz
You're
was
right. It was,
acting
by the way.
like a
You're right about that.
comedian in that fight. And it was funny at the time, but then when you look back at it, it was very disrespectful to the fans. That, you know, I'm surprised Dana White didn't come out and say, like, what the hell were you doing? You know what I mean? Like he trashed Anderson Silva. You remember when he had those,
when he
like,
fought Maya
weird,
and Talasaitis,
exactly,
yeah.
those weird title defenses. So when he left, I didn't think he left a big void in the UFC, you know what I mean? Because if you just look at his record and what he did, you know what I mean? Of course, the fandom carried him so much, and now his brother is doing it the same way. But there is still intrigue about Nick Diaz coming back because he has taken this time off. He hasn't fought. He hasn't taken any damage. Could he be better than he was before? Because, you know, he continued training. You know, he's been helping his brother prepare for these fights that he's been, you know, involved in. And he's been probably helping other guys that are in the gym with him. They're, what is it, the Nick Diaz Academy, right? There's a reason why it's named after him. He's probably, you know, cultivating this group of, you know, the next generation of talent. So I think that he's been training, he's been ready, and I think that's the reason why he come back. And another thing was, remember when Dana White first came out and said, yeah, we're talking to Nick Diaz, and they were saying, like, yeah, Khamzat Chimaev, we offered it. I was like, what? That was like, that surprised me, dude. I was like, you're going to throw him to the dogs like that? Like, that's stylistically one of the most dangerous matchups. And I'm glad Nick Diaz or someone in his camp was smart enough to not take that fight. And then they finally landed on Robbie Lawler. And here we are, man. We're excited for this one. I love it. I love the matchup. I think it's two guys that are, you know, at a certain point and similar points in their career. And then they have that history of that fight 17 years ago. And we're going to get a hell of a fight. I think we're going to get a good fight in this one. I think it's going to be.
I hope so. I just don't want anything like the Silva fight. That's all I'm saying. I just want to see these two guys go at it, and duke it out. Okay, two more quick things that I wanted to mention, and then I'll give my pick. First thing is, there was a period, and you can go Google it, where Nick Diaz was, he was doing his triathlons and he was training, but he was also partying a lot. And I remember talking to people sort of close to the situation, or people that were sort of in the know, that they were almost to the point where, like, they were worried for him because you saw, I remember he would do Snapchat videos or whatever where he's drinking and he's out and about and he was partying a lot, man. So that is, you talk about him not taking much damage. That is a bit of damage in terms of outside the cage as well. I mean, I know everyone's got, their issues or whatever, their challenges, but I remember at a point being like, okay, and I remember thinking at the time, like, okay, well, this guy's never coming back. If he's just partying and training, why is he going to come back? We haven't seen that recently. I'd say in the last year or so, I haven't seen any of that type of behavior. Not to say you can't go out and enjoy yourself, but it was every week. Remember, he had that whole thing with the girl. There was some sort of assault allegation. I think it ended up being false. Don't quote me on that. I don't want the woke mob coming after me, but I remember there's some issue there about some sort of dispute. And then I know there was drinking involved and all that. So there was a period, I want to say maybe after the Anderson Silva fight, maybe shortly after, a year or two, where he was drinking a lot. So that's a bit of a concern, in the sense that was probably time taken away from him, working on things or whatever. The second thing I'll mention that we haven't even talked about here is that this fight's at 170. The last time Nick Diaz made 170 was against GSP. The Anderson Silva fight was at 185. Can he make the weight? I know he's in shape. I know he's training. I know he looks lean. But you do wonder. I also wonder why this isn't at 185, in the sense that Lawler's fought at middleweight. Nick Diaz fought at middleweight in his last fight. Why are we cutting this extra weight when, let's be honest here, neither of these guys are going to go on a title run? Let's hope not anyways, because how the UFC does their matchmaking sometimes. But can Diaz make the weight? I mean, that's interesting. He's older. It's tougher to make that weight limit. I'm sure he will. He's I don't think he's ever missed weight, but I do wonder about that as well, cutting that extra weight to make the 170 limit for Diaz, especially with it being a 5-round fight, because when you cut that weight, that's got to catch up to you a little bit later in those rounds. So we'll see what happens with those two little caveats as well. But who am I picking? I got to pick Robbie Lawler. I have to. Lawler's been more active. For the most part, Lawler's losing to really good guys, right? Like, there's not one bad loss on there. I mean, maybe you could say RDA because he's at lightweight now, but even then, like that, we're talking about a former UFC champion in Rafael dos Anjos. The only concern I have about this pick is that, like John mentioned, we've seen Lawler be a little stagnant. When guys get in his face, he tends to not do so well when he's pressured. He sort of, goes into a shell a little bit, and we don't see that wild Robbie Lawler like we've seen in the Condit or Hendricks fights or any of those ones, right? So it's like it is a little bit concerning that he could maybe revert back to that sort of style, where he's not engaging. And Diaz is, he can be a pressure guy, but then Diaz can also be a counter guy, and that's when you get a boring fight. So I just, based off the evidence we have in terms of where they're at right now, like I can't bank on triathlon Nick Diaz being that much better than a guy who's actually fought really good competition. Like if Lawler's losing to like, I don't know, like I can say this because he's not in the UFC anymore, and I mean no disrespect here, but let's say Lawler's losing to like a Rocco Martin or losing to someone like that's outside of the top 15, then we could be a little bit more concerned about the pick. But he's losing to good guys. Nick Diaz has not had a good win in a very long time, and even the last one he did have is against a guy that went on a really bad run. So I have to pick Lawler here. Am I going to bet this fight? Absolutely not. I'm going to sit back with my popcorn or beverage or whatever and enjoy the fight, and hopefully it unfolds into something great. I'm going to, glass half full here today. I'm going to be really positive and say this is going to be a fight of the night, a great fight. But there is a part of me in the back of my head that worries that this could turn into the Anderson Silva fight. So the pick's going to be Lawler. Where are you going, and what did you think of those other two tidbits I added on the end there too?
I love those tidbits, man. I love tidbits. That's like my life. But to piggyback off what you said, Lawler, he gets stagnant, and the losses that stick out the most in this streak that he's on, RDA, Covington, Magny, a lot of the fight, large segments of that fight, they were pressuring Lawler, right? And I think Nick Diaz will be able to do that. Because what I'm looking at is, okay, Nick Diaz is this type of fighter, and I don't see him evolving any. You know what I mean? Let's be real. We don't see him evolving. We just see Nick Diaz come in and fight like Nick Diaz. So if Nick Diaz fights like himself and he's pressuring him and he's able to swarm Robbie Lawler like he does and pressure him against the cage and hit the body and mix in the striking, the boxing really well against Robbie Lawler, I think that Nick Diaz will win this fight. You know what I mean? I think Robbie Lawler, the way that he's fought the last 4 times, the last 3 times, especially against those guys, I think that style is not going to work against Nick Diaz. I think Nick Diaz is coming back because he's been promised certain things after this fight. And this fight is kind of like a setup fight for Nick Diaz. Because if Nick Diaz wins this fight, impressively, it'll bump him up into some big matchups, right? Because I don't think this is just a one-off fight for Nick Diaz. I think Nick Diaz is coming back because they're offering him some big fights, big cash, big things going on, because he has handlers next to him, man. It's not like he negotiates with the UFC by himself. He has people, he has management that control all of that. And I think that the UFC is planning something big for him. And all he needs to do is go out there and take out Robbie Lawler, right? Get a big win, get an impressive win. And this is a good matchup for him. I think it's something that, it's almost like a setup fight in a way, because they believe Robbie Lawler is probably on a downward spiral. He's losing to everybody, and Nick Diaz is coming back. He's beaten him before. Maybe psychologically he could get into his head before the fight. You know what I mean? Because Nick Diaz, you don't know what Nick Diaz you're going to get. You might get the nice guy, or you might get the crazy idiot that comes out and misses press conferences and stuff like that. And that could mess with Robbie Lawler. Robbie Lawler's not a shit talker. So
yeah. These are 2 real fighters. That's the cool thing about this fight. These 2 guys, they're not putting on a show. They're not giving you any fake persona. It's 2 guys, like this is like almost like a street fight, like these 2 guys, if they had a problem with each other, they'd handle business the same way they would in the cage outside of the cage. So
exactly.
That's what makes things really interesting. Do have to mention the odds. Shout out to producer Michael for getting the odds up here. Robbie Lawler -110, Nick Diaz -100. So, they agree here. And I think those odds are perfectly fine because there's just so many question marks. I will say this, and I touched on it a bit earlier, and I want to emphasize it here again. There are more ways for Nick Diaz to win this fight than Robbie Lawler, in my opinion, because Lawler's not knocking him out. Lawler's last stoppage win, John, was against Rory McDonald in July of 2015. So it's been a while since we've seen, and granted, level of competition, he's fighting guys that don't typically get knocked out. So there's that. But Nick Diaz, I don't think he's ever been finished other than the doctor stoppage in Elite XC. Yeah, he's never been finished. Think of how many fights he's had in his career, and he's never been finished. So Lawler, I don't think, is knocking him out. Lawler's definitely not submitting him, so we can scratch that out too. Lawler, I think his only chance is to win a decision. I could see Diaz either submitting him, potentially finishing him later in the fight, even though but Lawler has been finished, or winning a decision as well. But but saying all that, I have to go with the guy who's more active. So I just wanted to point that out as well. So
yeah, and
I'm staying away from this one.
Something that sticks out too, that for the people that are backing Lawler, is that the guys that he's lost to, like Covington and RDA and the Haitian Sensation, is those guys wrestled with them and took them down. Mm-hmm. Nick Diaz is not going to do that. So the threat of the takedown is not there. So possibly Robbie Lawler will get more loose on the feet and throw more bombs. And that could be real dangerous for Nick Diaz, man, because you don't know what his chin's like right now. You don't know. It could be better. It could be worse. But I think there's more on the line for Nick Diaz heading into this fight compared to Robbie Lawler. And I think Nick Diaz is going to come in because he's been in big spots and won fights too. You know what I mean? So this is a good matchup.
I'm still sticking with my conspiracy theory with the Diaz brothers that they're trying to run out their contracts so they can go box these YouTube guys.
I tell everybody about that.
It's true. Like that's why I think it's because look, and I'm glad you didn't say this. I didn't think you would, but I don't think Nick Diaz does not want to fight Usman. Are you crazy? Like, why would he want to fight these guys are not going to fight wrestlers. What this would set up, we might as well talk about this here quickly too. And we'll get to the questions. We've got a lot of questions coming in here. We've done already 30 minutes, but a win for Nick Diaz would set up Masvidal, would set up McGregor, would set up, there's a lot of, those are the type of fights he would get. He's not going for gold here. Yes, it would pay him more money, but he's not, Usman could just out wrestle him for 5 rounds. We all know that's what's going to happen. Both of those guys are looking at bigger, like these types of fights, like the Robbie Lawler type fights that are like notable names, guys that are going to stand up with them, not wrestlers. We're not going to see those fights. I mean, I guess potentially you could do another Condit fight, but those are like fights that I see in Nick Diaz's future. I don't see him going for a title or anything like that. It's going to be fun fights that gets fans interested and 5-round fights too, by the sounds of it. It seems like that's a Diaz clause these days. So
that's a great point, is that Diaz has a lot of fights that it can be offered to him if he wins this. Robbie Lawler, not so much.
Yeah. I agree with you there. Okay, let's get to questions. We got a lot of them coming through. Let's start with Lucas in the chat. He says, who do you think is the most likely opponent for Tony Ferguson McNuggets? I just think it's too early to talk about opponents for Conor McGregor. We have no idea how his recovery is going. I talked to Ben Saunders, who's actually fighting on a regional show for, it's called XMMA. There's a lot of UFC vets on that card, actually. Cody Gibson's on there. John Dodson was supposed to be on there, had an unfortunate accident, so he's out. Ramsey Nijam is actually who's fighting Ben Saunders. Anyways, the reason I bring him up is because Saunders has been working with Tony Ferguson remotely. I didn't know this, but Saunders was part of Ferguson's camp for Beneil Dariush, so they've kept a close sort of friendship there. But what he mentioned in the interviews that he believes Tony will fight by the end of the year. So that sort of gets rid of Conor McGregor as a potential opponent. I don't know where they're going to go on this. I still maintain if you're Ferguson, why fight an up-and-comer? Why fight someone like like this idea that he's going to fight Makhachev is crazy. Like, plus Ferguson hates that management group anyway, so I don't see him giving them the opportunity. I think if the UFC was smart, you do a notable name in the division, someone that's also lost a step, and that's why I think the Donald Cerrone fight makes a lot of sense. You've got an aging vet who's also, taking a lot of damage, who's, to me, that's the type of fight he should get. I don't want to see him fight not that he would fight him because he's already booked, but I don't want to see him fight like a Fiziev or like a Saryukin. Like, people are bringing up all these prospects. I think Tony Ferguson deserves better at this stage in his career. I would rather see him fight a vet and go forward from there. I guess McGregor would sort of fit that bill at this point with the fact that he's a big name and he's also lost a step, but I don't think the timing is going to work out. If I had to guess, I'm going to stick with my guns. I think he should fight for Cerrone again. What do you think?
No, I would like to disagree. The reason why is that I feel like Ferguson, he's a name and he's a guy that you could build somebody off of. And I feel like the best fighter that you could put him against in that top 10, because I think you have to put him against a guy in the top 10, right? Is Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker's coming off losses. I'm actually fine with that. Yeah. And Dan Hooker, he's a guy, if you put him in there against Ferguson, you're going to get a hell of a fight. If Dan Hooker wins, Dan, you propel him back into that picture, right, of the top 5, top 6. And Dan, he's become like I don't know, he seems like he's created this cult following now, man. You interview him, he gets good numbers. This is much, he's drawing much more attention, even though he's losing, and that's very rare for a fighter. So why not put him against Ferguson? I think Hooker is the best matchup. Other guys are booked. Look at him. Like RDA, you put him against whoever, you know what? Makhachev at 5, I didn't understand how that happened.
By the way, can I just take a little sidestep? Because both of us have interviewed Hooker, and I have nothing against Islam. I do have something against a lot of the Islam fans who are just like ruthless, like a lot of the other fan bases in this sport. But people got to get over this whole Hooker didn't want to fight Islam a couple fights ago. Why would he? You're going to go from Dustin Poirier to Islam Makhachev, who has no upside, not a big name, ranked low. Of course he's not going to take that fight. People he was scared to fight him. No, he's a businessman, and then that's why they have rankings for a reason. You don't just get the Miami Dolphins don't get to play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the Super Bowl. That's not how it works. You have to work your way up to certain things. So the people who said that, well, Dan was ducking him. No, Dan was ranked higher and he deserves it. And then this idea of, well, Dan doesn't deserve to fight him now because he's lost 3 in a row. Yeah, but look who he's losing to. And also, you called out Tony Ferguson, so that goes out the window. Like,
Yeah.
what's the difference? So it's a lot of hypocrisy. That's all I'm kind of looking at with a lot of the fans there, where it's like, come on, like Hooker, I don't want Hooker to fight Islam. I would rather, like you said, I think the Ferguson fight makes more sense. I think he needs a fight where he can, get back on the winning track, so to speak. And I think Ferguson is definitely that. But this idea that Hooker isn't worthy of fighting Islam at this point is ridiculous. So
I don't think Hooker is afraid to fight anybody.
No, he's
like
not.
You said, it's about business when you get into that top 10, top 15, and he knows what he's doing. I think Hooker fights Ferguson, and I think RDA fights Makhachev. I think RDA is the best matchup. They were supposed to fight anyway. So for McNuggets, man, we'll talk about him in a year or so. You know what I mean? Like, there's no reason to talk about his matchups.
Antoine, shout out to Antoine, man. Every live stream I'm on, this guy always submits questions. Super nice guy. He was DMing me the other day. Shout out to, we really respect the people here who regularly tune in. I know J Spec Driver, not seen him today, but I'll give him a shout out anyways. He's always on here. He's on my stream the other day. He says, good morning, fellas. With Islam officially number 5 in the rankings, how many more fights until a title shot? And with Conor at number 9, what does he do when he comes back? Okay, first question. I'll give my take, and then we'll get John's thoughts on this after. He's, I think, 2 away. Maybe even 1. Mm-hmm. We'll see. You know how the UFC is with, certain fighters. It depends what the matchup is. I think right now the fight that makes the most sense for Islam Makhachev is Rothwell dos Anjos. He's a former champ. It's a winnable fight for Islam. They were supposed to fight already. They both had a win since then. That's the fight to make. Outside of, unless they wanted to do Gaethje or something. I don't know what's going on with Gaethje and Chandler. That whole thing seems a bit odd, but I think the fight to make is it's interesting because a lot of those people in the top 5 are managed. They have the same management, right? Justin Gaethje, Dariush, they're all managed by the same management as Islam. So I don't know maybe they're trying to avoid each other. I don't know because of that. We'll see. But yeah, so I think RDA makes sense. And what does Conor do when he comes back? We don't know. We got to wait to see. The division could look completely differently. I mean, Kevin Lee's still ranked at lightweight for whatever reason. They got to take him. I think he's still ranked unless they pulled him out. But we got to see how, listen, Conor's not coming back till next year. The division could very well change a lot from now until then. So let's, and I'm not getting upset with you. I just, in general, we got to slow the brakes down on what's next for Conor. We got to see when he can come back, then we can talk. But it's like Hamzat. I don't know how many chats. Who's Hamzat going to fight? He's going to fight. Everyone's like, he's got to fight this guy at 185. Well, he's not even fighting at 185. He's fighting at 170. So it's all a waste of time. So let's wait till he comes back. Your thoughts on that question?
Well, I just said it before the question came up that I think Islam should fight RDA. They were supposed to fight. You know what's weird? When I had doing my live chat with Aaron Bronstetter, he made the point of, how come RDA weighed in the week before to be the backup for that fight with McGregor Poirier, but he couldn't fight, a week later against Islam? That was just odd. And I was like, you make a great point, man. Why didn't they just set up that fight instead of the Moisés?
I see it from RDA's perspective, though. They were supposed to fight already. RDA gets the win over Felder, who at the time was ranked. Technically, RDA would be ahead. I think that's where he's coming from, and obviously, if you had the choice, you're gonna fight Islam Makhachev, you're gonna be the backup for a potential, big fight like that. So I think they did it. I think they needed someone as the backup. I think Gaethje was like, no, I'm good. So Dos Anjos was like, I'll do it because I'm free, and he's coming off a win, and they sort of did it because it wasn't, they announced the Chandler backup was very much known at the time. Do you remember? I think it was Damon Martin who kind of was like casually like, oh yeah, RDA is the backup this Saturday. It's like, wait, what? Like this is a guy who's just come back to lightweight, got 1 win, and now he's the backup for this huge fight. So I think it was done strategically by the UFC that they had this backup, but it was kind of done in secret.
Yeah, so I think Islam, if he fights RDA, like finishes RDA, I think one more fight he'll fight, and then they'll give him a title shot.
Yeah, it's just
I think he's got the Habib rub, man. Like when you got the Habib rub, like they're gonna push you forward and get you in that title picture as soon as possible because he needs to fill the void, right? Hamzat was supposed to fill the void of Habib. It doesn't seem like it's happening, so they're gonna need Islam to, step it up, and they want to put him in the position to do it. So I think he's 2 fights away.
Let's roll through these questions a little bit faster here. I know we got a lot of people chiming in here. Jose Flores, Conor will be out for at least a year, so no point in discussing his opponents. I agree. You read my mind, Jose. Jose Flores, is Bilal versus Magny the fight to make it welterweight? Yes, it is. Absolutely is. 2 guys who've picked up some wins, picked up some losses, good social media fan bases. They both seem to want it. I've been following sort of the Instagram back and forth. Yeah, that's the fight to make.
Yeah, 8 and 9. Neil Magny's 8.
Who'd you favor in that fight?
Man, I already know who I would have to go with Magny.
Same.
I would have to go with Magny.
Bigger guy. I think had some more impressive wins. I love Bilal. I mean, trust me, the cool thing for me about Bilal is I remember, and it's funny because that's his nickname. I remember when no one knew who this guy was. I interviewed him before he made his Titan FC debut. He had just left Bellator. And now here he is, one of the most popular guys. He's got his own show on the Anik and Florian network. Great guy. Wish I could interview him. It's too bad he signed with that rival, the management, because he was with First Round before that. It would have been no problem, but now not so much. So there you're going to go. Antoine says, seeing how Jeremy lost on Saturday, making it 5 in a row, where does he go from here? He's got to get cut, does he not?
Yeah, it sucks to see fighters get cut, but man, there's other fighters that you could put in that spot,
PFL,
in that roster, right? Yeah, I think that would be perfect. Is go over to PFL, you get a chance at $1 million, and then some guy, some prospect, on the roster could make a name off you, I guess. I don't know. Jeremy Stevens, man, I don't think he made a lot of fans with all that stuff that he'd been saying about Drakkar Klose, dude. I think that was just
backfire.
Tasteless, dude.
Yeah. Kevin Nicholson, good to hear from you, buddy. Kevin's been a really good supporter. He does like sort of he talks a lot about injuries and MMA. Really good resource for that. If Lawler can touch up that mass scar tissue of Nick Diaz's face, the fight could be over very quickly. So Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong. I thought both Diaz brothers underwent some sort of procedure to get that fixed. You would maybe know better than me as far as that, but I mean, I don't know. You're the expert on this. Is that something that can be opened up even with surgery again? I would think that's corrected a little bit because he looked a lot. If you look at even photos from Diaz now compared to a while ago, I think he looks a little bit different. Not as bad as Vanderlei though. Remember, Vanderlei looked like a completely different person when they cleaned up his face. He used to look like a bulldog, then they cleaned it up, and he looks like way different now. So
yeah, he looks a lot more presentable as a human being, right? So I think Nick Diaz did go through something. I remember hearing something about it, right? So maybe that was part of his, during his layoff that, he went out there and got some work done in Las Vegas. Hopefully he did. So this fight doesn't end in a cut, and then all these people come out and say like, "Oh, if he didn't get cut, he would have won the fight." All that nonsense.
Shout out to Euro. Didn't have a question, but I just want to shout out. This guy's on every one of my streams. Jose Flores, is Shavrat the most intriguing welterweight prospect right now? He's for sure up there. To me, it's got to be Hamzat. Just with everything that he did last year, I think technically Hamzat's still considered a prospect. He's an up and comer. By the way, for those who, I've mentioned this on my Patreon, but I'll drop this here as well. I did reach out to his now manager, who was always sort of his manager as well, the guy who runs All Star Gyms. So this is what I was told, John. So maybe there's hope for both of us here. I was told he's not doing any media right now. I was not told no. So maybe there's a possibility. Fights in October. Maybe he'll do some media leading up. I would love to interview this guy. I've always wanted to. Of course, I couldn't before because of the management he's with. So there's a hope. There's a chance. Wouldn't that be cool if we both got to interview him, man? Honestly, that'd be a fun interview.
Of course. I'm always down for that. But Shavrat, man, he is a very intriguing prospect. 16-0 with 16 finishes. Nobody's like that. Not even Habib came into the UFC like that. And he's pretty much melted everybody in the UFC he's fought. He's finished everybody. So I would like, in his next fight, I would like to see him face one of the like gunners of that division. Welterweight, it's a stack full of gunners, right? Stack full of guys that will go out there, go for finishes. I would like to see him fight like a Nico Price.
Oh, did we
right?
lose,
that's the type of fighter I would like to see.
Or maybe.
What happened?
Oh, no, you're back. You cut out for a second. At least on my end. I don't know if it did on your end as well. But anyways, gotcha. I didn't mean to interrupt you, by the way.
So. No. It's all good. I was done. I was just saying that he should fight like a Nico Price, a veteran, that guy that goes for finishes, a little bit of a name. You know what I mean? I would like to see
Price is a great matchup. Price has fallen, obviously, a couple losses, so that's he's got to bounce back. Antoine points out that Nick's first loss was a 49-second KO from Jeremy Jackson. I forgot about that. The same Jeremy Jackson, if you remember on The Ultimate Fighter, got kicked off the show because he jumped the fence to go see a girl. Do you remember this?
Oh.
The comeback season? They should do another tough comeback. I would see. I'd watch that because the problem, like, I'd be honest, I PVR'd tough. I've yet to watch it, and even if I do, I'll fast forward right to the fights. I would rather see some people I already know and see how I know they did the comeback one already, like recently with the title shot one with Tim Elliott and all them. But I want to see, like, they should do like a welterweight one and bring back like Ben Saunders and, like, I don't know, just like some more notable names or something. That would be fun.
This season I've watched most of it, and it's just like, there's nothing different, and there's not really many characters or anything like that. So it's just like, okay, it's turning into just a regular season where you just watch the fights and that's it. You know what I mean? And maybe some of the guys will make it to the UFC. That's it. I don't know. Tough hasn't really, intrigued me any, to be honest with you. And I know most of the people out there, like the coaches too. I know them. Like, I've interviewed a lot of them. It's just not fun.
Ally Quinta called Tony out. I don't know if Al's actually. I know Al is in Georgia right now with Merab Dvalishvili. Him and Aljamain are there right now. So I don't know. Is he even ready to come back? When I talked to Merab like a month or two ago, he was saying that Al's like knee is still bothering him or something. So I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe he's ready to go. I'm not sure. Gregor Gillespie could fight next. RDA, Tony Hooker. Which one would you prefer? Probably Hooker, actually. Gregor's got to get a good fight. If Hooker doesn't fight Tony,
Brad Riddell. I think they should.
Brad Riddell would be a good fight too. Yeah, good one. Jose Flores, who had the better chin, Lawler or Nick? Lawler KO'd by Woodley and Nick KO'd by Jeremy Jackson. I don't know.
Hard to say.
It's like, yeah, I don't know. You'd have to go, I guess. I think Lawler's technically been finished more than Diaz has, I think.
Yeah, but mostly by submission, though.
Yeah, so it's true.
It's hard to say.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a bad word or not. I got to double check this here. Akash Verma says you are Chow Mao. What does that mean? CHAUMAU.
I have no idea. I don't even know what that means.
Anyways, we'll move on from that. Jose Flores, why is Lawler Diaz 1 your favorite fight? It's not my favorite fight of all time. It's one of my favorites. My favorite fight of all time is Chandler and Alvarez 1. It's one of my favorite fights because just the action in it, where like you watch this fight and you see a fighter and Nick Diaz do something that you weren't expecting in him, trying to stand and trade with Lawler. It was Lawler's first knockout loss. It was just a good fight. And Nick's talking trash in the fight. See, I didn't mind this because Nick was winning the fight. So it's like, talk all the trash you want. It's like Kevin Holland. You're talking trash to Brunson. You better be beating him. He wasn't doing that. In the Diaz fight, he was winning. He was taunting. In fact, I think Mazzagatti I think it was Mazzagatti who was refereeing, said, stop doing that. And you just don't see that too often. And it's just a fun fight to watch. This is back when Lawler had hair. Just goes to show how old it was. It was just a great fight. So I recommend going and watching that for sure. Comment for John. I think Da Jung will get Serkinov next. Your thoughts? Any insight to that?
Well, Tanja just did an interview like over the weekend, and he said that he has something in the works. And I talked to his coach. I think they're going to be fighting in Vegas, not on Fight Island. So it could be Serkinov. Some people were saying that it could be who just announced that they were going to fight somebody. Tyson Pedro. Someone said possibly Tyson Pedro. I think both those fights are good because Taun Jung's undefeated. He's finished most of his fights. His last win was really impressive against what is it, Knight? What is it, Brandon Knight? I forgot his first name, but Knight. Yeah, he's over there in the Northeast. But yeah, I think he's one of the better Korean fighters, one of the better Asian fighters. I think overall, dude can do everything. So Serkinov would be good, man. That's a decent name.
Lucas, which up and coming young fighter do you think has been the biggest disappointment over the past year or two? Macy Barber. Has to be, right? Is there anyone else that I'm trying to think? Like, I wouldn't consider Johnny Walker an up and comer because he's not like super young. Is there anyone else like a prospect that really hasn't panned out? I guess we could go all MMA.
It's hard to say because some of them are still in their up and coming phase right now, right? So yeah. And even Macy is also, she's in her up and coming. I heard there's a lot of money coming in on Macy Barber for this fight this weekend. This is what I saw online. Yeah, they're saying like there's a lot of money coming in. There's been like no insight into Macy because she's not doing much media. I think she only did the one interview with Cole. Yeah, I tried reaching out, no dice. And she's been at Alpha Male, so I'm curious if that. And this is another camp switch up for her. We sort of, I don't know if we talked about it on here, but that was a bit interesting as well. Oh, Chow Mao means good luck in Vietnamese. There you go. So I don't know why he's saying good luck, but we can always use the luck. Kevin Nicholson says, I think Nick Diaz had a procedure to help the scar tissue. Not sure about Nate, but that face of Nick's will still bleed regardless. His eyebrows are so prominent, like razors over the tissue. This is why we got Kevin on here. We should get him on the show when it comes to injury stuff. He's the man. So it's a really good to sort of do that there. Jose Flores, Daniel Rubenstein has an underrated stable of fighters. Jan Shavat. Shavrat is with Danny. Demir, Fiziev, Armin, Avaliev. Armin is with, you're right. He is Calderwood, Klein, and many other Muay Thai prospects. He's got some others. He's got Chiesa. He's got, by the way, my favorite thing about Daniel Rubenstein as a manager, and maybe you'll agree with me here, does all the interviews in Google Calendar. The only manager that does that, which because I do it anyways, when I have an interview book, I put it in Google Calendar so I can keep track, but that's such like just an easy thing to do. And it makes it so, and then everyone's accountable because the fighter will see it. It goes to their email. One of the best in the business, met him a number of times at events. Great guy. So shout out to Daniel Rubenstein.
you're right. Great. And, it's not just Daniel. Sayat, who works with him as well. Great as well. Super nice guy. Always translates our interviews with Piotr Jan. Great guy as well, too. So really some of the best in the business. There's some management companies I rag on in here. They're not one of them. They're the opposite. I really enjoy working with them. And I know you do, too, because you're in touch with them every now and then. So
yeah, for sure.
Cool. How would Gaethje versus Dariush go? Antoine is asking that. I would probably favor Gaethje. A little bit of an edge in power. Wrestling's there too. We've seen Dariush get knocked out, whereas I don't think he's fought a guy with that type of knockout power in a while. So I would probably favor Gaethje in that one.
Yeah, it's Dariush. He kind of gets caught up in these brawls, and I think with Gaethje, if he gets caught up in the brawl with Gaethje's just more slicker in the pocket, and he holds that knockout power, like you said. I think I would favor Gaethje in that matchup, but I think they should put that fight together because they trained together too before.
Mm-hmm.
But who knows?
Before we get to Antoine's, actually, we'll get to Antoine's last question. We'll do our underdog picks for the weekend, and then we'll get back to questions. Antoine says, a lot of people have Miranda destroying Macy. What do you guys think? I don't have her destroying Macy. I think she's going to end up winning a decision. I think the UFC knows what they're doing here. You have to look at the matchmaking. I know we see a lot of prospect versus prospect matchups, but it is interesting that they took so much time to build up Macy. They put her in a co-main event her last fight, so they obviously think very highly of her. She's now lost, and now after 2 straight losses, you're giving her Miranda Maverick, who just beat another prospect in Jillian Robertson. It seems a little it almost seems like they're saying, we believe more in Miranda now. You better prove it that you're as good as you say she is. Because if you wanted to preserve what you've already done with Macy, you give her a veteran that's maybe on a bit of a skid or something. Someone not Miranda Maverick. But this seems like odd matchmaking to me at this stage in Macy's career. So it almost seems like, and I have this theory that I think the UFC is kind of like, okay, well, we've run our course with Macy. We now believe in Miranda. We want to see what happens. But saying that, I don't think she's going to destroy Macy. Miranda just got by Jillian Robertson. She clearly won. I don't think there's any point where Miranda was in danger in that fight, but Macy's still, there's some good traits about her. She did knock out Jillian Robertson. She's, got some decent wins. And the two girls, Roxanne, part of that was an injury, but the Alexa Grasso fight, not a bad loss. Grasso's pretty solid at 125. So I think there's a possibility Macy can win. I'm picking Miranda, but I don't think Miranda's going to destroy Macy. No, I don't buy into that. Well, I think she'll win, but I don't think she's going to destroy her.
When I talked to Miranda, she was all not down to fight another prospect either, because she just had fought Jillian Robertson, another prospect, and she beat her, and she's like, they're matching me up with Macy. And she also told the story about how when they first met, they were filming it, and they told them to go back into the elevator so they could film it like they first met. And she said it was all awkward, and that's when she knew they were going to set up the fight, because they were trying to create this atmosphere, they're filming all this stuff. So, but she says she has no problem fighting them, but it's very odd that you're knocking it off, because she was thinking man, I could fight like an Antonina Shevchenko or somebody like that up, higher up, a veteran. But this fight, I think Miranda is gonna go in there, and I think she's gonna have the best performance of her career, or her career so far. I think this is tailor-made for her.
Let's get to this weekend's card. If you missed it, we did preview this. I feel like, didn't we preview the Sandhagen and Dillashaw fight back when it was first announced in May, I think? I forget. Yeah, it was a while ago. But yeah, a lot of really good fights on here in terms of the matchups. As far as an underdog pick this week, man, we are getting, it's a tough one. So slim pickings here. I am going to go with, yeah, man, this is really, 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 really tough. Okay, I'll tell you who I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with Andre Ewell. And the reason I'm going to go with Andre Ewell is because Julio Arce is going to be dropping down to bantamweight for the first time since 2016 when he fought Brian Kelleher on the regional scene. How's that cut going to go? I know he's had lots of time. He hasn't fought since November, since the New York card, UFC 244. But I think also the time off could be a detriment. And I think with Ewell, always been a pretty active guy. He's not going to have his size advantage like he usually does, because Arce's coming down, and Arce is a pretty big guy himself. So I don't see any huge advantages there, but I do see their potential for, I see this as a 50-50 fight, and I think Ewell could be the guy to potentially pull it off here. So because I have to pick one, I will go Andre Ewell in this fight as the underdog to pull off the upset. Who do you like, and what are your thoughts on my underdog pick?
Yeah, I already picked Andre Ewell to win that fight. I think a fight that's before I get to the underdog pick, I think a fight that's a very good fight and it's a toss-up, it's going to be on Adrian Yanez and Randy Costa. That was one I was looking at too. A banger, right?
Yeah.
But the the pick that I'm gonna look at as the underdog is, even though I picked Jordan Williams, I think Mickey Gall.
Oh shoot, I did pick
Mickey
Mickey on my other show.
Gall.
I missed that fight. I'll let you have that one though. That's fine.
Yeah, Mickey Gall, I think possibly can go in there and surprise some people, man. We haven't seen Mickey Gall in a while, and Jordan Williams, he's a guy, he's tough and he's been through the ringer. But for some reason, if they get to the ground, I just think Mickey Gall can submit him. And
Yeah.
if Jordan Williams, if he plays around too much, Mickey Gall has good jiu-jitsu, man. It could be a possible upset right there. He's the underdog.
Yeah, I like Gall in that fight as well. I actually interviewed both fighters, so people are like, "Ah, you're being biased." I talked to both of them. Jordan Williams, interesting thing for this camp at Factory X, moved over there. I think that's a good move for him. I do wonder how he'll be at 170. See, Mickey's the mainstay at 170, so he's used to cutting that weight. And Mickey's a big guy. I've seen him in person, interviewed him in person. He's a very big guy, so I don't think there'll be any sort of size advantage there for Jordan Williams. But I think with Gall being in the weight class longer, with the fact that he really needs a win here, he's coming off that loss to Mike Perry. I think he can go out there and pull it off. And I do agree with you with the ground game. And I also don't know how good Jordan Williams is, because if you look at the Gregor Rodriguez win, now that you look back on it, that's actually a pretty good win. But outside of that, not a lot of great performances. I think Gall could potentially surprise a bit here. So I agree with that pick as well. That'll be one I'll be keeping an eye on as well. Other underdogs I would consider in this spot, I think Dillashaw, just potentially, with who knows how he'll look when he'll get back. You never know. I think that's a wild card there. Macy Chasson is one I would sort of, keep an eye on as well. I think Aspen's a better fighter on paper, but coming off that long layoff and Macy being more active, and Macy just being an underdog in general, I feel like in a lot of her fights could go up there. She's very strong for the division, although saying that, Aspen's a tank as well, and I mean that in a good way. Not trying to be disrespectful there. I think Darren Elkins is another one to maybe keep an eye on against Derek Minner. He was one I was looking at too, with just him. I think Darren's not the same fighter he used to be, and I think Derek is improving every fight. That's one as well. And I think there's a potential for Puna Soriano I know he's only a slight underdog there, of him potentially knocking out Brendan Allen, because Allen has been finished before against Sean Strickland. He doesn't like getting pressured, and Puna is certainly a pressure fighter. So a lot of 50-50 fights. I'm actually not betting a lot this weekend, just because I want to sit back and enjoy. Oh, and I don't think it'll happen, but Belbita fighting Hannah Goldie, because of the fact that Goldie has such a huge layoff. She hasn't fought since her debut, which was on short notice, and in 2019. So huge layoff for Hannah Goldie, had a lot of injuries. I know she cuts a lot of weight as well. Maybe Belbita will look better at 125 instead of 135. So we'll see. Sorry, 115. Actually, yeah, that's wrong. And don't worry, because Tapology had it wrong as well. That fight is actually at 115, because I interviewed Hannah. She said it's at 115. So just keep that in mind as well. It's Belbita moving down from 125 to 115.
I think she had a tough time at 125. I mean, like, I don't know. That's pretty risky right there for her to drop down. She might, who knows? She might miss weight. I don't know.
So there you go. Let's keep the questions coming, everyone. We'll take like 2 more questions and we'll wrap things up here. We're almost out of time here. Is it time for Jeremy Stephens to go to bare knuckle? I hope not, man. I don't like this trend of fighters, when they're losing in the UFC, they go to bare knuckle and then take even more damage, whether it's scar tissue and all that. Like, I know Thiago Alves is over there now. I don't know. I'm not into bare knuckle. And by the way, can I also mention this? The Page fights this weekend, right? For bare knuckle, is it not? Page and Ostovich?
Mm-hmm.
Is it just me, or does this not, like, I feel like there's been like no promotion for this whatsoever. I kind of even forgot it was this weekend. I know they're starting to ramp it up. I know Mike Heck's over there. Shout out to Mike, by the way. First assignment, I think, for not first assignment, he's in Bellator before, but first like sort of bigger event for Mike, covering stuff for MMA fighting. So best of luck to him. But I feel like there's not a lot of buzz with this bare knuckle card, and this supposedly is 2 of their biggest signings.
Yeah, not too much. Not too much. I feel like even though they have like Paige Van Zandt fighting Ostovich, there's not much talk even on social media. It's very confusing. But to me, I don't really care if fighters are going up to bare knuckle, man. They go over there. If you can make money, if you can drain the bank account over there, go drain the bank account over there. Because, you know what I mean? Like, do I watch bare knuckle? Very rarely. You know what I mean? Like, if Paige is fighting, I watch that one, right? But other than that, really, I don't really know who's fighting. Like, I saw that Thiago, like you said, Thiago Alves won a belt over there. Did I watch that fight? No, I did not. But seems like they're making money. Whenever fighters are making money, man, I'm all good for that, man. It's all good. Long as they're not like walking around slurring their words and they're still fighting over there at bare knuckle, then I'm concerned. But it doesn't seem like it. Thiago is doing pretty good in his life.
I'm all for the fighters getting paid, but I do think you look at some of the damage these guys get with just the bare knuckles. That's where I'm kind of like, like if they, okay, for example, if this fight was in Bellator, I'm cool. I might even watch it. I just, for whatever reason, I don't like seeing the just the bare knuckle fighting. I'm not being a hater. It's just, I don't know. It's not for me. And there's so much to cover as it is in terms of the sport. Like I'd rather watch an LFA card, to be honest, if we're looking at there. Okay, we'll get to one more question here. Is Tanner Boser fighting Rothwell or Tuavasa next? Might fight Rothwell. Like, I mean, he just finished OSP. Rothwell beat OSP, right? So maybe do that fight. Give Tanner a vet.
I don't think they'll do Tuavasa. I think they'll keep.
No, they're gonna
Boser
they're gonna keep
away from each other as much because they're kind of like two different personalities, and I think the UFC could cultivate those personalities. I don't see them fighting each other. Rothwell, on the other hand, he's on the back nine. You could put him against Tuavasa. You could put him against Boser. Man, there's both those guys fought Arlovsky, right? So, to me, Arlovsky and Rothwell, they're kind of like in the same, I don't know, group, I guess, in that heavyweight division. Like, you don't know what to really do with them. So you just put them against the up and coming guys. So Rothwell against Tom Aspinall, you know what I mean? Like, there's a long list of young guys coming up.
You guys, if we missed you, and girls, if we missed your question, just post it in the comments or hit us up on Twitter. We're very interactive on there. We're more than happy to answer your questions on there. But I do want to thank everyone who did submit questions. Another reminder, download the Fantasy Fanatics MMA app. I already put my picks in. You can follow along with us. There's standings. It's really just a great app. And shout out to the whole team over here for making this possible, this podcast, and doing the app as well. So make sure you download that. Hit the like button on this video. Really helps us out when it comes to recommendations on YouTube and all that stuff. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you're not subscribed already. You can follow me on Twitter, @Lynch on Sports. You can follow John JHK MMA on Twitter as well. Anything else you got going on this week that you want to plug for the viewers here?
Man, there's nothing really going on this week. I'm taking a little break,
Good for you,
this week. But I do have my live chat on Thursday night, Friday morning over here in this side of the world. And shout out to J Spec Driver 702.
Saw him come in.
They're coming in. And other than that, shout out to James. Shout out to everybody at Fanatics.
Yeah,
they're
Michael,
great, man. Continue this show, man. We're gonna keep it rocking and rolling. Yeah,
we just before we hopped on here, we did get the word that we will continue to do the show. Keep it going. We love doing this. This is like my favorite podcast every week. So don't tell that to everyone else. But it's been great, and we're so happy to do it. We love the format. We love the way we can talk about really notable fights and all that. As far as me, I did interview Jared Cannonier on Monday. You can check that out on Middle Easy on their YouTube channel. I also have it on my UFC playlist as well. Who else did I talk to this week? Let me just look at the old Google Calendar just to plug a few things. Mickey Gall, talked to him. Also talked to a couple other UFC fighters as well, and I got another couple cool interviews coming up the rest of this week. So just keep tabs @Lynch on Sports on Twitter. For myself, for JHK, for producer Michael, and everyone here at the Fantasy Fanatics MMA team, we really appreciate you tuning in. We will be back a week today previewing another upcoming notable fight. Enjoy the fights this weekend. Stay safe, stay hydrated, as Dustin Poirier says, and have a great day. Thanks so much for watching.